No, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings isn't Christian. The religion sure likes to say otherwise. Okay, I just got done reaming one hole, why not another? Oh, Jonathan Paletti, you think The Lord of the Rings had nothing to do with Tolkien's Catholicism. I haven't seen this level of cope since I read the comments on my mouse video. I have a feeling I know where this is going, but just for fun, let's check his bibliography. Let's see what he's written. 8 things Christians say that just ain't true. Amy Grant's Divorce from Hell. Evangelicals Gone Wild. Queering God. Oh, so you're one of them. I might have known. So let's just establish his argument. He claims that Tolkien's work had nothing to do with Tolkien's faith. Quote, Christians have a long history of trying to claim J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings as basically a Christian text. With the new Amazon adaptation, The Rings of Power, there's sure to be more rounds of it, all oddly disconnected from facts. Let's take a look at Tolkien's religiosity and the godless book that he wrote. Tell me you've never read Tolkien without telling me you've never read Tolkien. I mean, it's just laughable. If you're at all familiar with Christian, especially Catholic theology, you can see numerous thematic elements in Middle-earth that echo elements of the Christian mythos. Tolkien didn't write one-for-one metaphors, allegories, or trade-offs, unlike his friend C.S. Lewis. You're not going to be able to pick a single character, like Lewis's Aslan, and say there's a perfect match for a Christian figure, in Lewis's case, Jesus. Tolkien preferred to wrap themes in the lore of Middle-earth, so you can see elements of the Old Testament manna and the New Testament Eucharist in the elven way bread lembas, and how it's rarely given to humans, how it's fulfilling, not just physically, but mentally, possibly spiritually. You also see this in characters like Melkor or Morgoth, who seem like a Lucifer figure at first, but in context to the lore blends in elements of Norse and possibly Celtic mythology as well, especially in how the Valar relate to each other, and Melkor's overall power and the effect on Arda. If you're looking for a one-for-one matchup, that's just not what you're going to find, but go ahead, make your argument. Quote, in the fantasy of Middle-earth, this would seem to be a barrier to finding in The Lord of the Rings to be a Christian work. As the literary critic Edmund Fuller noted, in this story there is no overt theology or religion. There is no mention of God. No one is worshipped. There are no prayers. Well, that's not entirely true. There are sayings, quotes, chants, and songs that in context to the world of Middle-earth could be comparable to prayer. The thing is that within the world of Middle-earth, things have developed differently than they did in the real world, so the assumptions that religion would or should hold the same importance in Arda is false. The elves, at least some of them, literally lived among the gods. Some of them even married lesser spirits. Why would they worship them in the same way we worship the concept of a distant god? Why would they even think about them in the same way we do? Paletti mentions a paper by Claudio Testi that references Gandalf's claim to be the wielder of the secret fire. Quote, a 2013 paper by Claudio A. Testi, Tolkien's work, Is It Christian or Pagan?, hashes out the sources. He finds both Christian and pagan theological ideas lurking in the plot. On close analysis, there is a spirituality at work in Middle-earth, a talk of fate and intention to key events, very vague talk of a deity force, the One, and a mystic secret fire. Is that Christian? As a one-for-one comparison? No. As a thematic comparison? Yes. The One references Eru Ilúvatar, the one god who uses his voice to create the whole of existence, which should be self-explanatory what that's referring to. The secret fire could be a reference to the frequent mentions in the Old and New Testaments of fire being a tool of God, and often a symbol of his presence. I mean, this is basic Bible study, man. So, what is Paletti's actual argument? It appears to be this, quote, Tolkien never said publicly that his novel had a religious origin. In a foreword to The Lord of the Rings in 1966, he'd written that it was primarily linguistic in inspiration. But then he quotes this section from a letter Tolkien wrote to a fan, quote, I have deliberately written a tale, which is built on or out of certain religious ideas, but it is not an allegory of them, or anything else, and does not mention them overtly, still less preach them. So, the book did have a religious origin, which Tolkien himself freely stated to a fan in 1958. Okay, so can I ask a technical question? Did you read the quote before you quoted it? It literally says the opposite of what you claim. This isn't someone playing semantics over the synonymous meanings of the word remove and ban, but Tolkien saying the thing you claim he didn't say. I just wanted to ask because I think it might have a bias. Like when you say things like this, quote, "The Lord of the Rings could easily be read as anti-Christian, it being a story, after all, featuring wizards, magic, and demonic beings, subjects often seen as religiously anathema to Christian people." Somebody hasn't read the Bible. There's magic and demons all over that motherfucker. And then there's this, quote, "There are other hurdles to finding a Christian in any popular sense. The novel has deep critiques of men in power. There's no racism, misogyny, homophobia, compulsory heterosexuality, or theocracy, all standard in Christian stories." Somebody hasn't read The Lord of the Rings or The Silmarillion either. And then the coup de grace, quote, "Discussion of sex, that great Christian obsession, is muted, but Tolkien's vision is deeply queer." Oh no, I've got nothing to say. I'm just going to let that hang there because it's so fucking retarded. I think by now people can notice the flaw in Paletti's argument. He's already drawn a conclusion and he's ignoring evidence that disproves his conclusion to the point that he's willing to quote that evidence and then claim it doesn't say what it clearly says. That's how you get this epic self-own. Quote, "A single letter seemed to clarify Tolkien was a Christian writer. The 1981 collection, The Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien, reprinted a 1953 letter that Tolkien had written to Father Robert Murray, who had noted that Galadriel, the Elf Queen, seemed to him to resemble the Virgin Mary. Tolkien seemed to agree, and added, The Lord of the Rings is of course a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously at first, but consciously in the revision." Okay, so we're done. Tolkien said that it was inspired by his religion and revised to further include those references. We're done. Or so you would think if you had a functioning brain. But if you had a narrative you didn't want to let go, you might claim Tolkien was faking his religious beliefs because he was talking to a priest. Quote, "Christian fans read this as a slam dunk, failing, as usual, to pay attention to context. This is a story about a Catholic man who wrote a non-Catholic book having to deal with that problem in a discussion with a priest." I see the right's not the only one arguing in favor of a lost cause. The cope. The absolute cope. Dude, I have the book. This is letter 142. Tolkien was friends with Father Murray. Father Murray was one of his readers who critiqued sections of The Lord of the Rings so Tolkien could revise them. He even ends the letter saying that Edith, his wife, would contact Murray to talk about something else. What possible reason would Tolkien have to fake the inspiration of his stories, especially with one of his friends? Then Paletti goes on to question whether Tolkien was a true Catholic or even a true believer, and at that point, he loses all merit. You're questioning a dead man's faith, and with the weakest arguments possible, like taking quotes out of context and talking about how his mom converted to Catholicism? What if Tolkien wasn't as Christian as everyone thought? This is your proof that The Lord of the Rings wasn't inspired by Christianity? How religious Tolkien actually was has nothing to do with his inspiration for The Lord of the Rings because they're two separate things. He could have been a secret atheist and still have been inspired by the religion he grew up with. This is why I mentioned the whole difference between the one-for-one trade-off or an allegory versus what Tolkien actually did, which was applicability. It just wasn't his style to say that this thing is that thing. He alludes to it. He mixes it with other myths. He reshapes the concepts to fit within his lore. So sure, the Christians who claim that The Lord of the Rings is about Christianity are wrong. And so are you to claim that it had nothing to do with Christianity. You're both wrong. But at least they have the sense not to prove themselves wrong in their own article. So the article made the rounds and Paletti got clapback, so he wrote a follow-up article titled, "Wow, my post on Tolkien got a lot of Christian men triggered." Quote, "It seems that thousands of them read about the absence of religious references in the fiction of J.R.R. Tolkien. Surprised? I hate to break it to them. The Lord of the Rings is a story of a wizard and elves defeating orcs by helping hobbits melt a ring. There's no gestures to any deity, and no religious practices. It is not a Christian text. I just explained this to you, dumbass. Listen, baby, it's not a one-for-one copy of the Bible. It's inspired by biblical stories and themes, and those themes are all over the text." Then he says, quote, "But Christian men tend to like Tolkien. Their tradition has no fun books, and so they've given it a special religious exemption. But I'm not Christian, and I'm seeing the same thing they're seeing. How do you explain that? Am I secretly Christian? Or in denial of my faith? Or is it because the themes are in the fucking book? I would think your ass would hurt from trying to stick your head up it, but it appears you've got such a pebble-sized head it just slides right in." He wraps it up with this, quote, Reading my post, they went back to their social media feeds to proclaim me a stupid leftist atheist who can't understand the most basic concepts. Well, if the shoe fits. Like the Lord of the Rings being an unconsciously Christian text. No, that's not what they said. We know this because we can read the comments people left saying that Christian themes are clearly in Tolkien's work. And we know that's true because Tolkien admitted this, which you quoted, twice. Then he says, quote, "There I go, trying to speak rationally about a religious culture organized by men who have lost track of reality." Well, you'd be the expert on losing track of reality. Pray to a Iluvatar that you can find the straight path. And no, not that straight path. God forbid you actually breathe. Oh, what's this? Is The Lord of the Rings a queer love story? Don't you want to visit the South? I hear they take good care of your people. Something about a secret fire. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.